My son stood in my kitchen, the one I painted myself 3 summers ago because I didn't want to pay someone $60 an hour, and told me I was an embarrassment. What he didn't know was that I owned the building his company leased for its head office. I want to be clear about something before I tell you the rest of this. I am not a dramatic person. I have never once in my 67 years enjoyed conflict. I raised my son on my own after his father left when the boy was 4, and I worked 2 jobs through most of his childhood without once asking anyone to feel sorry for me. I drove a used Civic until the wheels nearly fell off. I bought my clothes at Value Village and thought nothing of it. Thrift was not a phase for me. It was a value. It was something I was proud of. My son apparently was not proud of it. His name is Joel. He's 39 now, and for most of his life I thought I had done something right with him. He married a woman named Serena about 4 years ago. Serena is fine. I want to be fair. She grew up in a large house in West Vancouver. Her father is a commercial real estate developer, and she has never in her life used a coupon. That's not a crime. But it does mean that when she looked at me, at my cardigan from the Sally Ann, at my 10-year-old Honda, at the small but tidy bungalow in Burnaby I've owned since 1998, she saw someone beneath her. She never said it outright. She didn't have to. It started small, the way these things always do. The first Christmas after they married, Serena suggested gently that perhaps gift exchanges should have a minimum spend. She said it with a smile. She said she just wanted everyone to feel valued. I had knitted Joel a sweater that year. I'd been working on it since August. He held it up, glanced sideways at Serena, and set it down. The second year they hosted, Serena redecorated the dining room before we arrived, and I overheard her telling her mother on the phone that she'd moved the good dishes to the sideboard so Vera wouldn't accidentally use the wrong ones. I am Vera. I've been Vera for 67 years, and no one has ever worried about which dishes I'd used before. But I said nothing. Joel seemed happy, and I told myself that was enough. Then they asked to move in. It was February, about 2.5 years ago now. Joel called me and said they'd been having a hard time with rent in Vancouver. This is true for everyone. I understand this. The city is brutal. And asked if they could stay in my spare room just for a few months. I have a 3-bedroom bungalow. 2 of those rooms sit empty. I said yes immediately. They moved in with 9 boxes, 3 suitcases, and Serena's very large, very fragrant candle collection. I reorganized my own hall closet so they'd have space. I started cooking more because I thought it would be nice to have a full table again. I did not charge them rent. I told Joel that family doesn't charge family for a roof, and I meant it. The few months became 6, then a year, then 18 months. I noticed things shifting somewhere around the 8-month mark. Serena began referring to the house as our place when she was on the phone. She rearranged my kitchen cupboards one afternoon while I was out, said it made more sense this way, and didn't mention it until I couldn't find my own tea. She started hosting her friends here without asking, which I would not have minded if she'd mentioned it once in advance. I came home one Tuesday to find 4 women I'd never met drinking rosé in my living room and Serena introducing me as Joel's mum, as though I were the guest. Joel said I was being too sensitive. He said she was just trying to make the space feel like home. I asked him whose home. He laughed. He actually laughed. The shift in him was the part that hurt the most, if I'm being honest. He had always been a good boy, quiet, thoughtful, a little serious, but somewhere in those months, Serena's family's opinions began to matter more than mine. Her father, a loud, barrel-chested man named Gord, who drives a new pickup every 2 years and considers himself self-made, though his father left him a great deal of money, had taken Joel under his wing professionally. Joel started wearing different clothes, started talking about optics, started clearing his throat when I mentioned I picked up something at a thrift store. One evening, I came downstairs in my old housecoat, the green flannel one I've had for years because it's comfortable and warm, and Serena had her work friends over for dinner. She looked at me and then looked away. One of her friends smiled too hard. Joel found me in the kitchen 10 minutes later and quietly, with his voice very even, said, "Mom, I need you to think about how things look when you come downstairs like that." I didn't say anything. I poured myself a glass of water and went back upstairs. I lay in bed that night and thought about the 2 afternoon shifts I used to work at the pharmacy when Joel was 7, so I could buy him proper winter boots. I thought about every school trip I scraped together money for, every birthday cake I stayed up until midnight to bake from scratch, every parent-teacher interview I rearranged my schedule to attend. I thought about the years I didn't go out, didn't buy anything for myself, didn't take a single vacation because I was making sure he had what he needed. I thought about all of that, and I decided that I was going to give him a little more time. That was my mistake. 3 months later, Serena's father came for dinner. I cooked roast chicken, roasted vegetables, a pie from scratch. Gord walked in, looked around the bungalow, and said to Joel, "Loud enough for me to hear from the kitchen. You know, with the market the way it is, this lot alone is worth a lot. Be ashamed to let sentiment get in the way of good financial sense." Joel nodded. I came out with the pie. No one mentioned what had just been said, but 2 weeks after that dinner, Joel sat down with me at the kitchen table. My kitchen table, the one I sanded and refinished myself in 2019, and said they'd been thinking. He said the house was bigger than I needed. He said the equity was just sitting there. He said that he and Serena had found a beautiful condo in Port Moody, and that with what I'd get from selling, I could comfortably move into an assisted living community in Coquitlam. I am 67. I walk 4 kilometres every morning. I do not need assisted living. I asked him what had prompted this. He said very carefully that they were thinking about the future. He said it would be better for everyone. I asked him to leave me alone for the rest of the evening. He seemed surprised by that. I did not sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, though I was. A little, in that dull way you are when something you build is suddenly under threat. I was mostly thinking, planning, if I am honest, because there is something you should know about me, something Joel had never bothered to learn. I have a business. It started when I was 34, 2 years after his father left. I had the house, a small amount in savings, and a fierce desire to never be financially dependent on anyone again. A woman I knew was selling a coin laundry in New Westminster. 4 machines. Barely profitable, lease about to be renewed. I bought it. I fixed the machines myself with YouTube tutorials before YouTube existed. I found the manuals. I called the manufacturer. I learned. I kept the books at night after Joel was asleep. I sold that location 8 years later at a significant profit and bought 3 more. Then 5 more. I have been quiet about all of this. Not secretive exactly. But I never discussed finances at the dinner table. I never talked about money at school pickup. I wore my Value Village cardigans and drove my old Honda because I genuinely prefer to live simply. The company is registered under a numbered corporation. My lawyer handles the structural pieces. My accountant is a calm woman named Dr. Faye Osei, who has been shaking her head at my personal spending for 15 years because I refuse to buy a nicer car. I own 31 coin laundry and dry cleaning locations across Metro Vancouver and the Fraser Valley. I also own the commercial building in Burnaby where Joel's employer, a mid-sized logistics company, leases their entire 2nd floor. Joel has worked there for 6 years. He has attended company events in that building. He has parked in that lot and eaten lunch in that lobby. He has never once connected his mother to the name on the lease. After he asked me to sell my house and move to assisted living, I called Dr. Osei. Then I called my lawyer. His name is Mr. Abera, and he's an exceptionally calm man who once told me I was the most methodical person he had ever worked with. He did not seem surprised when I explained the situation. He said, "So we're restructuring?" I said, "Yes, we're restructuring." The first thing I did was inform the property management company that the commercial lease on the Burnaby building would not be renewed when it came up in 90 days. This was legal, proper, fully within my rights. The tenants, including Joel's employer, received notice through the standard channels. I did not contact Joel's company directly. I did not do anything that was not completely above board. The second thing I did was more personal. Joel and Serena had been talking. I learned through some gentle listening about how the house would eventually come to them. Joel had apparently told Serena's father that he was confident it would be straightforward, that there was no other family, that I was on my own, in that way that people mean when they want to say someone has nothing. I updated my will. Everything went into a charitable trust. The house, when it eventually sells, will fund bursaries for single mothers returning to the workforce in British Columbia. My business assets go to 3 specific charities, including one that funds skilled trades training for women over 40. Joel gets nothing, not out of cruelty, out of clarity. I told him this on a Wednesday evening in October. He and Serena were in the living room. I sat down across from them and I laid out 3 documents on the coffee table: the updated will, a letter from my lawyer, and the incorporation papers for my numbered company, which include a schedule of assets, the laundries, the dry cleaning locations, the commercial properties. Serena looked at the papers and then looked at Joel. Joel picked up the asset schedule. He looked at it for a long time. He put it down. He said, "Mom." I waited. He said, "How did," and then stopped. I said nothing. He picked it up again. He read it again. He set it down very slowly, the way you set something down when your hands have gone a little uncertain. He said, "The Burnaby building." I said, "Yes." He said, "That's where I work." I said, "I know." Serena said, "What does this mean?" I told her calmly that it meant the lease was not being renewed, that his employer would need to find new premises, that this was not my concern and had been handled through proper legal channels, not personally. Serena said that wasn't fair. I looked at her for a moment. Then I said that I had cooked 3 years of dinners in this house, had given them a rent-free place to live while they saved nothing, had been told to consider how I looked in my own home, and had been advised to move into an assisted living facility at 67, and that none of that had struck anyone as unfair at the time. She didn't say anything after that. Joel asked, and I could hear something cracking open in his voice, something young. He asked why. I told him the truth. I said that I had waited a long time for him to see me. Not my house, not the equity sitting in the lot, not what he might inherit. Me. I said I had given him every chance to be the person I had raised him to be. I said he had chosen instead to be someone I didn't recognize, and that I had made decisions accordingly. He said he didn't know. He kept saying it. He didn't know about the business. He didn't know about the building. I told him that was the point. I have a spare room. I still have the same house. I'm still wearing the same cardigans. The difference is that I am not sitting in it wondering whether my son values me or my square footage. Joel called me 2 weeks later, not about the money, or at least not only about the money. He called to say he was sorry. He said it plainly, without the careful tone he'd been using for the past 2 years. He said he'd been thinking about what I'd said, about being seen. I listened. I didn't rush to forgive him, and I didn't slam a door either. I told him I loved him, which is still true. I told him that if he wanted a relationship with me, it would need to be built on something real, and that I was not too old to learn whether a person had changed, but I was also not so desperate for company that I would accept the appearance of change in place of the actual thing. He said he understood. I said I hope so. My kitchen still has the same paint I put on it 3 summers ago. My Honda is still in the driveway. I still use coupons. And every morning I walk my 4 kilometers and think about the 34-year-old woman who bought 4 washing machines in New Westminster with shaking hands and absolute certainty. And I think she would not recognize what her son almost talked her into. She'd be proud of what I did instead. I keep thinking about the moment Joel picked up that asset schedule and read it twice, not because I enjoyed watching it. I didn't, not the way people might assume. I felt something quieter than satisfaction, something more like relief, like a door I'd been holding shut for a long time had finally gently closed on its own. What happened between Joel and me didn't come from nowhere. It built the way these things always do, slowly in small moments that are easy to excuse one at a time. A sweater set aside, a comment about how things look, a dinner table conversation about equity and assisted living that no one apologized for the next morning. Each one seemed minor. Together they told me exactly what I needed to know. I think about the 34-year-old woman I was when I bought those first 4 washing machines in New Westminster. I had almost nothing. I had a child who needed winter boots, a house I was determined to keep, and a clear-eyed understanding that no one was coming to fix things for me. That understanding was not bitterness. It was something more useful. It was the kind of honest thinking that makes you get up early and stay up late and learn to read a lease agreement yourself rather than pay someone to do it. It was the foundation of everything that came after. I didn't build 31 locations because I was exceptional. I built them because I refused to stop when things were hard and because I never confused looking comfortable with being stable. Joel grew up watching me use coupons and drive a used car. What he didn't see, what I perhaps should have shown him more plainly, was the spreadsheet behind those choices, the discipline, the difference between spending less because you have to and spending less because you've decided to. That's not his failure entirely. It's partly mine. But there's a difference between understanding how someone came to be who they are and accepting what they ask of you. Joel asked me to sell my home, shrink my life, and disappear quietly into a facility so that his social circle wouldn't have to look at my old cardigan. He asked me to make myself smaller so he could feel larger. And I think, if I am being honest, he had learned that lesson somewhere. Not from me, but somewhere. The choices we make have weight. That's not a spiritual claim. It's just what I've watched happen over a long life. When you treat someone's dignity as an inconvenience, eventually you find out what that person is actually made of. Joel found out about me, and I think in a quieter way, he found out about himself too. He called. He said sorry. I believe he meant it. Or at least I believe he meant the beginning of meaning it, which is the most honest place to start. I told him I loved him because that was still true and pretending otherwise would have been its own kind of lie. But I also told him that love isn't an override. It doesn't cancel out what was said or erase the calculation his father-in-law made out loud at my kitchen table while I was in the next room with a pie. Accountability doesn't dissolve because someone feels bad afterward. That's not how any of this works. What I hope for him, what I genuinely hope, is that he develops the kind of character that doesn't need a humbling moment to activate. That he finds his way to treating people with decency, not because he's afraid of what they might own, but because it's simply the right way to live. I raised him to know that. Somewhere along the way he forgot. I think he's remembering now. The bursaries go out in the spring. Single mothers, going back to work, getting a hand that isn't condescending. I think about them sometimes when I'm on my morning walk. I think about who they might become if someone just gives them a little room. That 34-year-old woman with the shaking hands and the washing machines, she became me. I'd like to think she'd be satisfied with how this turned out.